The invitation. The coffee had gone cold hours ago, but Elena Vasquez barely noticed. Her fingers danced across the holographic interface, adjusting the quantum resonance patterns for the 15th time that evening. The fusion reactor prototype hummed quietly in the corner of her laboratory, its containment field flickering blue-white like captured lightning. At 28, she had already revolutionized Earth's energy systems twice, but tonight's project could change everything. The laboratory door chimed softly. Elena frowned without looking up from her work. Security protocols should have prevented any interruptions during her late-night sessions. The chime came again, more insistent this time, followed by something impossible. The air in front of her desk began to shimmer and twist, forming patterns that made her eyes water. Elena stumbled backward, knocking over her chair as a three-dimensional projection materialized in the empty space. The hologram displayed a massive structure unlike anything in human space, a crystalline fortress suspended within a field of floating asteroids, its surfaces crackling with energy that defied every law of physics she understood. Geometric text appeared beneath the image in multiple languages, including English. Nexus Academy. You have been chosen. The voice that emerged from the projection carried harmonics that human vocal cords could never produce. Elena's training kicked in, and she reached for the emergency communicator on her desk, but her hand passed through empty air. The device had vanished, along with everything else in the laboratory except herself and the glowing hologram. Elena Vasquez of Earth, the voice continued, resonating through her bones rather than her ears. I am Commander Zeph of the Nexus Academy. For 3,000 years, we have trained the galaxy's defenders against threats that would consume entire civilizations. Today, for the first time in our history, we extend an invitation to humanity. Elena found her voice, though it came out as barely more than a whisper. This has to be some kind of simulation or dream. The hologram pulsed, and suddenly Elena could see herself from multiple angles, as if dozens of invisible cameras surrounded her. Data streams flowed past her image, her academic records, her engineering innovations, even classified military projects she had consulted on. The voice continued with emotionless precision. Our observers have monitored your species for decades. While humans remain technologically primitive by galactic standards, certain individuals demonstrate exceptional adaptive capabilities. Your recent breakthrough in quantum field manipulation caught our attention, but it was your response to the Mars colony crisis that marked you as worthy. Images flashed through the hologram. The Mars terraforming disaster 3 years ago, when equipment failures had threatened 2,000 colonists. Elena remembered those 72 hours of desperate improvisation, jury-rigging life support systems from mining equipment and agricultural processors. The official reports had called it a miracle of engineering. Elena had called it the most terrifying experience of her life. Nexus Academy exists to forge weapons against the darkness. Commander Zeph's voice took on a grave tone. Our mortality rate is 40%. This is not metaphor. Many who accept our invitation do not return home. Elena's mouth went dry. 40%. Nearly half of everyone who attended this place died during training. The rational part of her mind screamed that this was insane, impossible, probably some elaborate hoax. But the technology displaying this hologram was centuries beyond anything Earth possessed, and deep in her engineer's soul, she recognized the signature of genuine alien science. Why me? She asked, surprised by the steadiness in her own voice. Because you think differently, the projection replied. Most species develop along predictable evolutionary paths. Their solutions follow logical progressions. Humans. The hologram paused, as if searching for words. Humans break patterns. You solve problems that should not have solutions. At Nexus Academy, pattern breaking often means survival. The projection showed brief clips of other species, tall, graceful beings with elongated limbs working in perfect synchronization, reptilian creatures with crystalline scales operating complex machinery with mathematical precision, floating energy forms that communicated through color patterns. All beautiful, all advanced, all moving with purposeful efficiency, and all predictable, Elena realized aloud. Precisely. The hologram shifted, showing Elena's face alongside representatives of these other species. You will be the first human to attend Nexus Academy. Your success or failure will determine whether your species is worthy of consideration for the greater conflicts ahead. Elena walked around the projection, her engineering mind cataloging details. The Academy's structure defied conventional architecture. Surfaces that curved in impossible directions, energy conduits that passed through solid matter, gravitational fields that operated independently in different sections. Whoever built this understood physics in ways that made human science look like children playing with blocks. What kind of conflicts? She asked. The hologram darkened, showing star systems going dim one by one across a galactic map. The collective comes. They consume entire civilizations, adding their knowledge and strength to their own. Worlds that took millions of years to develop are absorbed in days. The galaxy's defenders have held them back for millennia, but they grow stronger with each victory. Elena felt ice form in her stomach. How long do we have? Unknown. Perhaps decades. Perhaps years. The collective moves according to patterns we do not fully understand. What we know is that when they arrive, inadequate preparation means extinction. The weight of cosmic responsibility settled on Elena's shoulders like a lead blanket. She thought of Earth, her family in Mexico City, her colleagues at the Research Institute, billions of people living their lives unaware that humanity's survival might depend on decisions made in a laboratory at 3 in the morning. What happens if I refuse? Nothing. Commander Zeph replied simply. You return to your life. Your species continues its development unaware of greater threats. When the collective arrives, humanity faces extinction with whatever capabilities you possess at that time. Elena stared at the hologram for long moments, watching distant stars flicker around the Academy's impossible architecture. Every logical part of her mind insisted this was madness. Leave Earth, travel to an alien academy where nearly half the students died, undergo training for threats that might not arrive for decades. It violated every principle of rational decision-making. But the engineer in her recognized opportunity wrapped in terror. If this academy truly possessed technology that could defend against civilization-ending threats, humanity needed that knowledge. And if the choice came down to possibly dying in training versus certainly dying when the collective arrived, the mathematics were grimly clear. How long do I have to decide? Your transport arrives in 6 Earth hours. The invitation expires when it departs. Elena looked around her laboratory one last time. Her life's work surrounded her. Projects that could revolutionize human civilization. Research that represented decades of accumulated knowledge, comfort and safety, and everything familiar. Against that stood the unknown, alien technology beyond imagination, and the terrifying possibility that she might be humanity's only chance to avoid extinction. She thought about the Mars colonists, about the impossible solutions that had kept them alive, when all logic said they should have died. Pattern breaking, the alien had called it. Maybe that was exactly what the galaxy needed. I accept. The hologram pulsed once and vanished, leaving Elena alone in her laboratory with the lingering scent of ozone and the weight of destiny pressing down upon her shoulders. 6 hours to prepare for a journey that would either save humanity or kill her in the attempt. She reached for her personal communicator to record a message for her family, then stopped. How do you explain to people you love that you're leaving Earth to attend an alien military academy because the galaxy might end? How do you say goodbye when you know the odds of returning are less than favorable? Instead, Elena began to pack. Whatever lay ahead at Nexus Academy, she would face it as she had faced every challenge in her life, with preparation, determination, and the stubborn human refusal to accept that anything was impossible. The collective might be coming for humanity, but they would find the human race had sent its own representative to learn the arts of war among the stars. The transport arrived precisely 6 hours later, materializing in the sky above her laboratory complex, like a silver needle threading through reality itself. Alina stood on the landing pad with a single bag containing her most essential possessions and the growing certainty that nothing in her life would ever be the same. As the alien vessel descended toward her with impossible grace, Alina Vasquez took her first step toward becoming something more than human, toward becoming exactly what the galaxy needed most: trial by fire. The transport journey lasted 3 days by Alina's biological clock, though time seemed to flow differently in the space between stars. Her quarters were designed for a humanoid form, but clearly not human. The bed was too firm, the lighting spectrum slightly wrong, the gravity about 10% heavier than Earth normal. When the vessel finally stopped, Alina pressed her face to the small porthole and gasped. Nexus Academy hung in space like a crystalline spider web, its structures defying every architectural principle she understood. Massive towers twisted through dimensions that shouldn't exist, while energy bridges connected floating platforms that orbited the central complex in impossible patterns. At the heart of it all, a pulsing core of pure light provided power that registered on scales Alina's instruments couldn't measure. The docking bay stretched for kilometers, filled with vessels from across the galaxy. Alina saw ships that looked grown rather than built, others that seemed to be made of solid energy, and a few that hurt to look at directly. Her human transport was easily the most primitive craft in sight, barely qualifying as spaceworthy compared to the technological marvels surrounding it. Alina Vasquez of Earth, a voice behind her said in perfect English. She turned to see Commander Zeph in person for the first time. The alien stood nearly 3 meters tall, its insectoid frame covered in crystalline carapace that shifted colors with each movement. 4 arms ended in delicate manipulator appendages, while compound eyes the size of dinner plates focused on her with unblinking intensity. "Commander," Alina replied, fighting to keep her voice steady. Up close, the alien's presence carried an aura of contained power that made her skin prickle with static electricity. "Follow," Zeph commanded, turning without waiting for acknowledgement. Alina hurried to keep pace as they moved through corridors that teemed with beings from nightmares and dreams. A creature that looked like living liquid metal flowed past them along the wall. Something with too many legs and not enough faces chittered in a language that sounded like breaking glass. A floating sphere of crackling energy paused to examine Alina with senses she couldn't identify before continuing on its way. "How many species are represented here?" Alina asked, trying to process the overwhelming diversity. "Currently, 347, Zeph replied without slowing. "You are the first human. Most species send their finest warriors or their most brilliant minds. Earth has sent an engineer." Alina detected disapproval in the alien's tone. "Is that a problem?" Zeph stopped so suddenly that Alina nearly collided with the alien's armored back. The compound eyes swiveled to focus on her with laser precision. "We shall discover the answer to that question very soon." The orientation chamber was a vast amphitheater carved from what appeared to be a single massive crystal. Hundreds of new arrivals filled the tiered seating, representing dozens of species Alina couldn't begin to categorize. She found herself assigned to a section with other bipedal humanoids, though she seemed to be the only one without natural armor, enhanced musculature, or obvious physical adaptations for combat. Commander Zeph materialized at the chamber's center without appearing to walk there, his carapace now glowing with formal patterns of light. His voice carried clearly to every corner of the space without amplification. "New recruits," he began, the words carrying harmonics that resonated in Alina's bones. "You stand within Nexus Academy, the galaxy's final line of defense against extinction-level threats. For 3 millennia, we have trained warriors, tacticians, and leaders to face enemies that would consume entire civilizations." Images appeared in the air above him. Battle scenes from across the galaxy showing creatures that defied description fighting against forces of pure entropy and chaos. Alina watched beings sacrifice themselves to save worlds, saw technologies that could reshape reality being turned to weapons, witnessed the kind of heroism that songs were written about. 40% of those who enter these halls do not leave them alive. Zeph continued matter-of-factly. This is not cruelty. This is mathematics. The forces we train you to face show no mercy to the inadequately prepared. Better to discover your limitations here than when entire star systems depend on your strength. Elena felt the weight of hundreds of alien gazes as Zeph's eyes fixed on her section. Some of you come from warrior cultures where strength determines survival. Others represent species whose mental capabilities far exceed the galactic norm. A few possess technologies that approach the theoretical limits of physics. His gaze seemed to find Elena specifically. And one represents a species whose primary qualification is unpredictability. Nervous sounds rippled through the assembly, clicks, whistles, and harmonics that Elena assumed were alien laughter. She felt heat rise in her cheeks, but kept her expression neutral. "Your first trial begins now," Zeph announced. "Return to your assigned quarters. Instructions await." "Elena," she replied, offering her hand before remembering that gesture might mean nothing to an aquatic species. To her surprise, Crix wrapped a tentacle around her hand in what felt like a greeting. "Your reputation precedes you," Crix continued. "The betting pools give you less than 10% survival probability. I have wagered against the majority." Elena wasn't sure whether to be flattered or terrified. Why? Because every species here excels at something. Strength, speed, intelligence, technology. You excel at nothing, which means you must excel at everything. Adaptation incarnate. Crix's tentacles writhed in what Elena hoped was amusement. Also, desperate times require desperate measures, and your species appears to specialize in desperation. Before Elena could respond, both their wall displays activated simultaneously. Text appeared in their respective languages. "Report to Combat Chamber 7. Bring nothing. Survival optional." The combat chamber was a spherical room 50 meters in diameter, with no visible floor, ceiling, or walls. Just a smooth surface that seemed to absorb light. 20 new recruits floated in the center, held by some kind of localized gravity field. Elena recognized a few species from the orientation, but most were completely alien to her. Professor Vorth materialized among them as a column of shifting energy patterns that somehow conveyed both intelligence and vast amusement. When it spoke, the words formed directly in their minds rather than their ears. "Welcome to your first lesson in impossible circumstances," the energy being announced. "You will notice that conventional physics has been suspended in this chamber. Gravity operates in multiple directions simultaneously. Electromagnetic fields shift randomly. What you think you know about cause and effect may prove inadequate." As if summoned by his words, the chamber began to change. Gravity vectors twisted, sending some recruits tumbling while others instinctively adapted. Elena felt herself pulled in 3 different directions at once and fought down panic as her engineer's mind tried to process the contradictory sensations. "Your task is simple," Vorth continued as chaos erupted around them. "Survive the next hour while the chamber attempts to kill you. Cooperation is permitted. Success is not guaranteed." The chamber erupted into lethal beauty. Energy beams lanced through the space, solid barriers materialized and vanished without warning, and the very air began to burn with exotic radiation. Elena watched in horror as a reptilian creature with natural armor was caught by intersecting force fields and simply ceased to exist. Around her, the other recruits responded according to their natures. Warriors charged toward perceived threats, only to find themselves attacking shadows. Intellectuals tried to analyze the chamber's patterns and were caught by attacks that followed no pattern at all. The few with advanced technology found their equipment useless in an environment that redefined physical laws moment by moment. Elena floated in the chaos and did something uniquely human. She laughed. The sound was so unexpected in the midst of lethal mayhem that several nearby recruits turned to stare at her. Elena's mind, trained to find solutions in impossible circumstances, began to see the underlying truth of their situation. "It's not trying to kill us," she announced, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber's acoustic properties. "It's trying to teach us something." "What?" Crix called out. using his tentacles to anchor himself to a temporary platform while dodging energy bursts. "That everything we think we know is wrong," Elena replied, and began to move through the chaos with deliberate purpose. Instead of fighting the contradictory gravity, she used it, allowing the conflicting forces to accelerate her in directions that should have been impossible. Instead of avoiding the energy beams, she used them as reference points to navigate three-dimensional space that had been folded into hypercubic geometry. "Follow her," someone shouted. Elena couldn't tell which species or even if they spoke aloud or telepathically. But the other recruits began to move as she moved, using the chamber's contradictions as tools rather than obstacles. Crix flowed through the space like liquid intelligence, his aquatic adaptations allowing him to navigate the impossible currents of twisted physics. A crystalline being Elena hadn't met yet began to resonate at frequencies that revealed hidden safe zones throughout the chamber. Even the warriors stopped fighting shadows and began working together to shield the less combat-capable recruits. When the hour ended and the chamber returned to normal physics, 16 of the 20 recruits remained alive. They hung in the neutral gravity field, exhausted but triumphant, while Professor Vorth's energy form pulsed with what Elena hoped was approval. "Follow her," someone shouted. Elena couldn't tell which species or even if they spoke aloud or telepathically. But the other recruits began to move as she moved, using the chamber's contradictions as tools rather than obstacles. Crix flowed through the space like liquid intelligence, his aquatic adaptations allowing him to navigate the impossible currents of twisted physics. A crystalline being Elena hadn't met yet began to resonate at frequencies that revealed hidden safe zones throughout the chamber. Even the warriors stopped fighting shadows and began working together to shield the less combat-capable recruits. When the hour ended and the chamber returned to normal physics, 16 of the 20 recruits remained alive. They hung in the neutral gravity field, exhausted but triumphant, while Professor Vorth's energy form pulsed with what Elena hoped was approval. "Acceptable," the professor announced. 4 casualties are within expected parameters. You will notice that survival correlated not with individual capability, but with adaptive cooperation. Remember this lesson. It may be the most important thing you learn at Nexus Academy. As they filed out of the chamber, Elena found herself walking beside Crix and a crystalline being, who introduced herself as Resonance of Deep Spaces. Other recruits nodded acknowledgement as they passed. Not friendship yet, but the beginning of something like respect. "The betting pools have been revised," Crix informed her with tentacle-writhing amusement. "Your survival probability has increased to 37%. Elena smiled tiredly. "Still not great odds." "No," Resonance agreed, her voice like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. "But better than any human has ever achieved. Perhaps that is enough for now." As they walked back through corridors filled with impossible architecture and beings from across the galaxy, Elena reflected on the day's lessons. She had survived her first trial not through superior strength or technology, but by doing what humans had always done best, adapting to circumstances that should have killed them and finding ways to turn disadvantage into opportunity. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new ways the Academy would attempt to forge them into weapons against cosmic extinction. Elena looked forward to discovering what other supposedly impossible problems could be solved with enough creativity, cooperation, and the stubborn human refusal to accept defeat. The collective might be coming for the galaxy, but they would find it defended by beings who had learned to thrive in chaos, to find patterns in randomness, and to survive through the simple expedient of refusing to die. Elena Vasquez of Earth was no longer just an engineer. She was becoming something the galaxy had never seen before, a human trained defender of civilization itself.